Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give it a few more moments. I still see some people that are joining in. So we will start pretty promptly at 1 o'clock. I know this time of year gets a little difficult to take an hour out. So give me a few moments and then we will get started. Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first CE series. My name is Joanne Vernon. I'm the Regional Manager for Benefit and Compliance Services on the West Coast for PrimePay. Today, we are going to be talking about the PEO transition and specifically really building the total solution, so putting it all together. I do have some housekeeping rules to go over real quick. First, everyone is in listen-only mode. However, I do encourage questions, so please be sure to use the question feature. If there is time at the conclusion, I'll answer those questions. If not, I'll be sure to reach out and answer them personally to each one of you. All right, so let's get this thing moving. Okay. So here are the rules to qualify to receive your 1 hour CE credit. It has been approved in the state of Arizona. And although we are doing this as a webinar, we do have the opportunity to monitor engagement throughout the webinar. We will also have some polling questions included during the webinar. And that's really kind of how we gauge that you are participating, is by answering those polling questions. So be sure when that polling question comes up that we get 100% participation so that I can make sure that everyone is going to get credit for their CEs. You don't have to take notes. I mean, you can for sure if you'd like to, but we will be providing a copy of the slide deck to everyone. This is being recorded, so we will also be able to provide the recording to all those that participate. And then I also do have a handout to provide, which I'll show that towards the end on kind of what that looks like. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are we gonna, and I went the wrong way. So what are we gonna talk about today? I think we need to begin the conversation with really the increasing need for technology and those connected systems. I think this is a big part of what makes a PEO attractive to employers. So we're going to go over just a couple of things on there. Then we're going to go into what is the perceived value of a PEO? Why do we see employers going in that direction? And then how can we identify the gaps so that you can take advantage of that challenge so that employers will not move to the PEOs and will stay with our brokers and consultant partners. And then finally, we will really, how do you apply this to your agency? What is the next steps for you? In my opinion, this is the part where I think we should spend most of our time is going over, how do you go in to win that business? So what does that look like for you? All right. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start right off the bat with our very first polling question. So I'm going to get that launched for everybody. And like I said, I'll give you a few moments, but remember, in order to qualify for the CE, you do have to engage in the polling questions. So let's go ahead and get the first one launched. All right, so hopefully everybody can see the poll. Really, rank it. What do you feel that employers are, where are they spending their dollars and their time right now getting digitalized? So what order do you see that happening? Is it that first one where it's benefit administration, payroll, and then onboarding, or do you see it as the second one with payroll, benefit enrollment, and then benefit administration? So I will give it a few more moments. Looks like we have only about 33% of you voted. I know that we started right off with a question, so I just want to give it a little bit more time so that everybody has the opportunity to participate. We're almost up on a minute, so I will give it a few more, about 10 more seconds, and then I will close this poll and we'll take a look at how everybody voted. Okay. Just saw a couple more came through, so I gave a little bit of a leeway here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. If you haven't voted, do so in the next couple seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Okay, so 40% of you, really is kind of split between those two. So benefit administration, payroll, and onboarding. The other 40% said payroll, recruiting, and onboarding. And then looks like 20% had mentioned the payroll, benefit enrollment, and benefit administration. So let's take a look at what the answers were, or not really the answers, but what it's being shown for technology. And of course, here I am having troubles with my technology. Okay, so according to the 5th Annual Guardian Benefits Study, 45% of small businesses have increased their spending on HR technology since 2015. However, the most digitalized right now is employers are going online for their payroll. Then benefit administration, or sorry, benefit enrollment, and then benefit administration. So we do see the payroll and the benefit pieces are the ones that employers are actually, taking advantage of at this time. So what's driving that technology change? Let's talk a little bit about that. The first one is, well, it's the workforce changes. And it's not only, the different generations, but what about remote workforce? We see that a lot more now as well. Remote work is also taking employees maybe over state lines, where employers can actually, where employers can actually maybe find different talent, maybe even less expensive talent. So I think the workforce changes are definitely driving some technology changes. Compliance demands. The ACA definitely brought compliance to the forefront. In order for an employer to, report if they're, subject to the ACA, having those tools readily available to do that reporting was a very big deal. Employer demands, the need and the want for that total and complete solution. In the last slide, we talked a little bit about employers and they're now adopting more technology for their self. The SaaS model, or you've heard of the cloud. So now there's more in the cloud solutions, right? There's easier access. It's no longer a software that you load onto your computer and you hope that that's still up to date as time moves forward. So that's a big one as well. Competition, direct to employer brokers. So think of somebody like Gusto or Namely, and some payroll companies, some PEOs. I think a good analogy that we can think about when it comes to the competition in those direct to employer solutions is, I think that's where, as a broker, that's where your biggest competition is coming in. when you think about, Netflix, what that was to Blockbuster. Blockbuster was so worried about the cable companies that they didn't even see Netflix coming in. So we have to be aware of who is our competition, and how is that affecting our business. So brokers must, really get involved with technology to remain relevant. And 53% of brokers agree that, that is going to be the success for both themselves and for their clients. So building that overall business solution. So obviously it's going to start with you, right, as the benefit consultant. That's where it needs to be. That's where it needs to be at. The second piece is, bringing in some solutions, something maybe a little bit different by using maybe pre-tax accounts, so that you can build out a more large or robust solution for your client. Compliance services, obviously bringing those solutions to play. A BIN admin system, so that an employee can go and enroll. We have to think about some of those too as not just a BIN admin for open enrollment, but how do we make sure that that BIN admin system is up and running for even new hires, and is it going to be a self-service solution? Bringing in the HR and onboarding, so bringing in those solutions. How can you take that employee from hiring straight into payroll into your BIN admin system? Onboarding. And then bring in the payroll solution. So building that total overall business solution in order to compete with the PEOs. Each one of those pieces may not exactly be technology driven, but a lot of them do take technology to make that all happen. This one is, reasons to adapt technology. First and foremost, you can track key metrics to place a value right on that BIN admin system. Enrollment, is it going to be a self-serve for the employee so that they can go in and update their own information, or is it going to be employer driven? New hires, rehires, and terminations that accompany so much of those benefit related events. This is probably not funny because many of you probably actually do end up in this situation, but you'll have an employer that comes to you and lo and behold, there's somebody that's been on their, medical billing statement and they need you to get them off, and it's been more than, 4 months. So using a BIN admin system to help manage those can definitely cut down on some of that. The analysis maybe of the number of life events and the types of events that are happening so that you can understand the workforce needs. Dependent audits, perhaps even, to police the benefit eligibility requirements. So there's different metrics that you can use. Benchmarking is definitely becoming a key driver for many employers. What is my competition doing? So how can you help benchmark that through technology? So let's just go ahead and transition kind of over to the PEOs. This is just basic right here. This is a very simple basic list of, what PEOs can offer. They do the payroll, the taxes, the unemployment insurance, workers' comp, HR, compliance. We all know this. One of the ones that I also see, is an employer thinks, well, I'm going to get large group benefits, so I'm going to have more options and it's going to be more cost effective. It's not necessarily true. Out in the market, when we're looking at different PEOs and taking over, there are actually different solutions that a broker can actually manage to make sure that is not the case. So what are some of the key attributes that an employer might, look at a PEO for? Now, of course, this comes from the National Association of PEOs, so NAPEO. They're saying that small businesses grow 7 to 9% faster when they're with a PEO. that employee turnover that is 10 to 14% lower, and that it's 50% less likely to go out of business. Those are some pretty interesting stats, and of course the PEOs, I'm sure, are using those when they're out there marketing. By contracting though with the PEO, that employer is entering into a co-employment arrangement. That last bullet, that I put on there, that co-employment, I do want to expand on that one a little bit more. So we'll do that in a different slide, but I do want you to think about that co-employment and what that means. So using that co-employment strategy, it really was an efficient strategy for brokers and brokers and consultants to use when trying to compete or to combat against a client moving over to a PEO. But that is now something that the competitor can fight against, and they have a really good strategy around it. And the reason that it's really no longer something that we should be using as our holdout or as our reason for them not going into a PEO was the Small Business Efficiency Act that was passed, clarified the rules, really clarified that co-employment model, and it created the voluntary certification process for PEOs. So no longer are employees that join, or employers that join a PEO, now subject to the large market rules and regulations. So what am I saying right there? What I'm trying to say is if there's an employer that has 35 full-time employees, it doesn't mean that because they're part of that PEO that they would now be subject to, let's say, the ACA pay or play guidelines, or that they would now be subject to FMLA just because they're part of a PEO. That act clarified that employer would still maintain and would be subject to the rules and regulations of an employer that was not part of a PEO. So that co-employment model doesn't really have a lot of play when you're looking at it in that direction or in that way. However, there are still some inherent risks of a co-employment model, and those are really with the payment of the taxes and who is ultimately responsible for any errors or omissions of payments. So the employer, believe it or not, is still 100% on the hook for any penalties or fines that are associated with not properly or not filing at all their taxes. However, as part of the act, it did create the voluntary certification process. So if a PEO goes through this certification process, the PEO, are now solely responsible for the payment of those taxes, and that has been removed from the employer. Therefore, if the PEO makes a mistake, they are now solely responsible, right, for those fines and penalties. There are over, I think it's 3,500 or somewhere around there, PEOs nationwide. What might surprise you, or maybe doesn't surprise you, but there are only a handful of PEOs that are actually certified. So there are only a few that have removed that burden or that responsibility from the employer in regards to those fines and mishaps. You can look up a certified PEO. It's pretty easy. You just really type it into Google, IRS PEO certification listing, and it's readily available. You can see who's on there. Of course, the largest certified PEO is, of course, ADP, and they are certified. So just some more information so that you know when you are going up against a PEO, it's a good place to look. Is this one a certified PEO, and what does that mean for this employer group? Who are our market disruptors? Well, payroll companies. I mean, we just talked about, ADP being the largest certified PEO. Paychex hasn't become, one of the top brokers in the country because they were out doing what you and I do. They did it by starting with their payroll clients and building that out. PEOs, obviously a market disruptor as well. Those direct to employer arrangements, which we talked about, like Gusto and Namely. I could have had a poll to ask you, if you ever ran up against either one of those. We see Gusto a lot more here on the West Coast, and we see Namely more on the East Coast. But Gusto was in a presentation yesterday, and Gusto started out as a payroll company. There was Zenefits, Zen Payroll, then they turned into Gusto. They've been in existence for, 6 years, and they have over 100,000 clients. So employers are definitely looking for that total solution. So don't just think of a PEO, but also think of those direct to employer companies, as well as your competition. Another one are, could be you guys right here on this line. You've already made the decision to embrace technology and to bring in those total solutions. But if you're one of the agencies that hasn't, well, people on this line could be one of your competitors as well. This grid that you see on the left side of the screen, that is the G2 grid. So G like girl, the number 2 grid. Look it up. You can Google it as well. This shows you, and there's different, when you actually Google it, there's different looks on how you can look at it. But this is the leaderboard when it comes to small employers and who they consider as high performers. I'm sure that you can see that very top left corner, ADP is up there. You see Gusto on there. I do love to see that one of our, technology partners, Ease, is right there in the mix as well. So definitely understanding who your competitors are and where everybody's playing in the market can help you to compete as well. All right, so let's go into our second polling question. So let me get over there so that I can start that one. All right, so the second one is going to be, if an employer joins a PEO, they are now subject to large market rules due to co-employment. So we're going to make this an easy one. It'll be a true or false, and everybody should be able to see that now. Again, I will give about a minute to get everybody to be able to participate. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but remember, participation shows that you're engaged, which shows that you get your CE certificate. So please be sure to take the time and vote for sure. Looks like we are doing pretty good. We still have about a half a minute left, so I will leave it open for a few more moments to get everybody the opportunity to vote. That awkward silence moment, but I just want to give everybody a chance. Looks like I'll be closing it in about 10 seconds. So if you haven't voted, hurry up and vote. And we can, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close the voting. I will share those results. So you should be able to see that 60% of you chose that to be false. That is correct. If an employer joins a PEO and they are certified, well, it doesn't even matter anymore if they're certified or not. If an employer joins a PEO because of that Small Business Efficiency Act, co-employment does not make them now subject to different mandates. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. Should be able to see my screen again. All right, so let's move into, let's make the transition now into how do you fill in those gaps? What does that look like for you in building out that model? So as you begin, to complete your business model, are you going to adopt a single solution? And that is your go-to-market strategy? Are you going to partner with several and consult with your clients to figure out which solution is best suited for them? Or are you going to outsource that through the technology? I think another one that we don't see on there is, are you going to pay for this as part of your services, or are you going to charge for this solution? You have to figure out what is it that is truly needed for this client. So when you're thinking about bringing together the total solution or breaking away from the PEO or from one of those tech-enabled brokers, plug and play, right, with the different partners so that you can truly customize what is needed and tailor that information for each individual employer. As a consultant, you can create different plans using different strategies that may not be available to that employer. And they're probably not available to that employer through a PEO. And I'm thinking specifically on pre-tax solutions. The pre-tax pieces of that, and we'll talk a little bit more as we get into the PEO part, but guess who gets the benefit of those pre-tax dollars? So if there is an FSA or an HSA or the PEO is actually getting the benefit of those pre-tax dollars. So when you're thinking about pulling away a client, that's a piece of the puzzle that it may not be a line item on their bill, but it's definitely something to talk about. And then of course, keep compliant by being sure to partner with an affiliated partner. Kind of mentioned this briefly really on the last slide. What is going to be your strategy? Do you want to, what is your strategy? Do you want to deploy in regards to your technology solutions? Are you going to bring it all in-house? What are the pros and cons to bringing it all in-house? I think one of the big pros is it's your data. You own that employer data. You brought it in-house. You own it. It's yours. If you outsource it, and maybe not all outsource situations are the same, right? But do you lose control of that employer data? Sometimes it is all about the data and you maintaining control of that. Identify your partners. Are you going to just put together one solution and this is the way it's going to look? This is what it feels like, and this is how it's going to be. I think of that as a PEO. They've built out this model, and if you join the PEO, right, you get X, Y, and Z. Or do you use it more as a plug and play? Do you recognize that each employer is going to have different needs and that each employer is going to want something different and not just the norm that maybe that they are experiencing with the PEO currently? This one is, it's just another slide to show all of the market disruptors. I think that the G2 grid is great. I'm sure that you recognize many of the names that are up there as people that are disrupting the market right now. A lot of your payroll companies, like I mentioned, the Namely's. You also have the platforms, right? We have Ease. You might have Employee Navigator. Perhaps you're using, Maxwell Health Benefit. There's different disruptors out there. Some of them you can actually partner with and be able to work together to create that total solution. All right, so this is my kind of favorite part, and that is the application. Like, what do you need to do to really get started? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What questions should you be answering? Of course, this is a high level because it's a 1 hour CE, but I want to still give you some information so that you have a little bit in your arsenal. So the first thing, right, that you're going to want to do is you need to identify the challenges that employer is going through. many of the PEOs that we take over, the challenges of the employer a lot of times is service. They're just a number in a big cog, a big wheel. So service always seems to be a big one. We see price as another big challenge. So identifying those challenges, perhaps this employer is looking to grow and they are now, just kind of grown their current solution. One thing I didn't mention in the very beginning, but most PEOs are very small, their employer size. Gusto's average employer size is 10. So when you're thinking about small businesses aren't looking for technology or they don't want it, it's not true if you think about who the competition is. And like I mentioned, ADP is the number one, payroll, of course, Paychex, and then of course Gusto with over 100,000 clients in 6 years. So obviously those are all originally were built on the small market strategy. So what do you need to do first? You've identified the challenge, you know what your employer is needing, and now it's time for you to get in there and really take a look at stuff. The first thing that you're going to want to get your hands on is their CSA. That's the client service agreement. The reason you're going to want to know this is you're going to need to know if they're in a contract. If they're not in a contract, what does the timeline look like? Do they have to give a 30-day notice, 60-day notice? Oops, my screen just moved. 30-day notice, 60. What is it? What is their contract? You'll need to know this because it's important for you to build a timeline, because there are lots of varying parts. So some things end at one time, other things end at another time. Another piece of it is to get a copy of their current billing statement. This will help you to understand what services are needing to be replaced. It also obviously lets you know what they're currently being billed. It's really, really hard to do apples to apples when you are looking at their billing statement, because they will move things around to maybe make it look like the health isn't costing as much, yet their payroll is 5 times the amount. So just gives you an idea of their overall costs and also what it is that they actually are paying for, so that you can, again, build out your timeline and build out. I think another step for you for sure is to find out if that PEO that they're working with is actually certified. It gives you a little bit in your arsenal. If they're not certified, does that employer recognize the risk and what could happen if the PEO does not pay their taxes correctly or at all? So find out if that PEO is certified. Then start building out your timeline. When does each service end? So when's the last payroll run? What are the dates of service that are being paid? That's very important, so that there's no lapse. Nobody wants to not get paid. Find out if there's something special that'll happen with that last payroll run. For example, a contract that we just recently reviewed, when they leave the PEO, they no longer have direct deposit for that very last payroll run. They will all be live checks. That's an important thing to prepare and for your client to understand. So find that out. Commonly, we see workers' comp, unemployment, the employee benefits, system access. There's another big one. When are those terminating? For system access, we generally see it's after the 5th day following the termination date. So that employer will no longer have the ability to go in and run any reports that are needed. So that's an important thing to know for your timeline. You don't want to get an employer, going down the road, and the next thing you know, that onboarding is not well, right? The first thing they're going to want to do is stop everything. I need to just go backwards. So again, when you're building that timeline, look for all of those. The employee benefits piece of it, things terminate at different times. Commonly, we'll see the medical, dental, vision, and basic life benefits that will end at the last day of the month. Disability coverage, we see that ending on the termination date. The flex services ends generally on the termination date. What happens to those employee balances? They're lost. That is all owned now by the PEO. So understanding that and preparing the employees so that they can spend down. It doesn't matter if the flex plan had a rollover, because once they terminate that contract with the PEO, that terminates the contract for those employees. And an employer cannot pay that out for them. That's against the IRS rules. COBRA is another really big one, another really big sticky point when it comes to leaving a PEO. So when you're building out that timeline, find out what the COBRA rules are. You might be surprised when you're reading that CSA that they're going to charge $1,500 per COBRA participant who remains on their plan. So getting COBRA set up immediately so that that employer is not going to be on the hook for some extravagant last ditch fee that the PEO is going to place on top of them. Think about your employee communication. That's going to be another big strategy when you're pulling away from a PEO. Everybody's going to have to complete new hire paperwork again. So, making sure you have the technology like an onboarding solution in order to manage that. What is their new benefit offering going to be? When will the new benefits start? What are those gaps? Is there going to be a gap for the disability? Most likely, right? Those probably start on the first of the month. Flex, what are the gaps there? And how is that going to affect the employees? So definitely the communication. The COBRA notifications. They will receive a notice from the PEO stating that if they would like to stay on their plan, that they can by joining COBRA. Think about that again. If the employee decides, I like those benefits, I'm going to stay on there, that employer is now on the hook for that monthly, really, penalty for that employee staying on the COBRA. Probably wouldn't happen because, as we all know, there's no employer contribution when it comes to COBRA, but it's part of that communication that you need to have so that your employers understand. Notifying existing COBRA participants of the transition. So if you have anybody, you don't want to leave them on there, you need to make sure that they get out. And then, of course, the pre-tax benefit accounts, those need to be spent down as well, so that the new enrollment information can be captured. All right. This here is a great, this is a sheet that I told you that as a follow-up. So not only will you get a copy of the presentation, you'll also get a copy or a recording. We will also send out this little checklist as well. And on the back, it has different things about, communications and things to watch. But what we've talked about really, make sure you're using a checklist. Find out what services need to be replaced. Check those off. Keep updated as services are procured, right, enrolled and active, so that you know that that client is being taken care of and they're getting everything that they are going to need. Build that timeline. When does each service end? Again, we talked about, the last payroll run. When does workers' comp end? Do they need EPLI insurance? Unemployment, employee benefits, COBRA. Just continue down the list. Again, that system access. When do they lose access to all those reports that they really are going to need? Not that they might not be able to get them right when they request it, but being able to download that and have it immediately is definitely going to be a win-win for the employer and for you as you make that transition. Okay, so that's going to take us to our third polling question. Let me run over and get that launched. Okay, our third question is, what are the key documents that you'll want to have in order to begin the PEO takeover? Is it going to, let me launch that for you. So what do you need? Maybe the benefit booklet, certificates in the payroll ledger, benefit booklet, client service agreement, billing certificates, payroll ledger, current COBRA participants. What do you think to get started would be the 3 best things to have to get moving forward? And I will again leave that open for about a minute so that we can make sure that everybody can participate. About 75% have voted. We're up to 88%. Moving right along on this one. And of course, I can see some of the results. So I think we all got this last one 100%. Again, I'll leave it open for a few moments. We have a few more that still need to be able to vote. All right, so I am going to go ahead and close that out now. Polling is over. Yep, absolutely 100%. You're going to want that benefit booklet and that client service agreement. So the middle one, the B, was definitely the answer that we were looking for on this one. And again, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, be sure to post a question on there. All right, let's move on. I did put together a few case studies. If we had some time, it looks like we do have some time to be able just to go over a few case studies and keep it as high level as possible. Definitely, this is a CE course as well. So here's one scenario. It was a law firm with 50 employees. During that discovery meeting, so remember identifying the challenges that that employer is facing, they felt that there was lots of service challenges. They felt like they were a small fish in a big pond. So the results of that takeover, there was no planned degradation, so they were able to practically get really, really close to the exact same benefit plan design and a similar cost scenario for that employer. The savings was about $1,100 per month, and the services that they put in place were payroll, a bin admin system. This one actually had 401k as well. Time and attendance was important for this employer. FSA, which now the employer is actually benefiting from those pre-tax savings. Non-discrimination, COBRA, ERISA, some HR support as well, and then workers' comp. In this scenario, the broker partner did pay for the COBRA, ERISA, and the discrimination testing. And then the broker partner did drive and does support that open enrollment process. So that was one scenario that was just recent of a PEO takeover. Scenario number 2, this is more of a blue collar, 125 employees. They were actually looking to expand and grow into different markets. So this was one where they really were kind of outgrowing the PEO model. Now they were actually utilizing a non-PEO for their HR, their bin admin, their payroll and tax compliance services. So they weren't really using any sort of solution in this scenario. But they were having ongoing challenges with data. So they needed to figure out, how could they bring and build all of those as into one solution. So, building that total solution. They were unfortunately having to spend time doing audit controls and correcting mistakes that were being made. So what they needed was that seamless integration from an employee getting hired through the HR onboarding process into payroll and feeding straight through to a bin admin system. So although they weren't utilizing a PEO, they were looking at a PEO because they thought that that was their way in order to address their challenges. What ended up happening is that broker was able to introduce, at one point we called them an ASO model, so administrative services option, and bringing in the different pieces like we had looked at in the very beginning with that little wheel that went around. Now, one of their biggest concerns was what was the service level going to be like by not going with a PEO. And of course, the broker was able to address those and be able to show that they would actually get better service and it would be more hands-on by staying in this model and not moving to a PEO. The third one, small employer, 13 employees, the average size really for a PEO. They were having lots of service issues. They didn't need every single service that was being presented to them, which meant that they were spending more than what they really needed. Because they were with a PEO, they didn't even have a broker. They went direct to the PEO to begin with, probably do their payroll, right? So what we had to go in is, creating a new relationship. Bringing in a broker partner was critical. For this one, that client ended up saving over $6,300. And what they needed the most was the payroll, onboarding, time clock, brought in some of those pre-tax benefits, obviously their compliance pieces, and then the benefits part, which the broker was able to bring in and address very specifically the service problems, right, that they were having to begin with. That is the end of the presentation. What will happen next is you'll get an email in probably about a week or two, and it will have, well, actually, you'll get an email immediately, which will have the recording. It'll have that PEO checklist and help you build out your timeline, and then a recording or the slide deck as well. And then in about a week, you will also be able, in your email, you will have your certificate for this one CE. I would like to thank everybody for joining. Any questions, I'll just go ahead and answer those offline with you directly so that we can give you a little bit of time back in your day. Keep in mind that next Tuesday is our second in this series, and it's the best practices for Section 125 success. It will be on Tuesday again, and it will start at 10 a.m. Thanks again, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.